I didn't know my parents were about to beg me for help until I saw my father's name flashing on my phone at 2:17 a.m. 8 years after they told me I was no longer their daughter. The last time I saw them, I was standing in our driveway with one suitcase, 42 pounds exactly. I remember because I waited on the bathroom scale. My mom crossed her arms and said, "You're a liability we can't afford anymore." Like I was a failed business deal, not their child, not their responsibility, just a bad investment. My dad didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He just opened the front door and pointed outside. No yelling, no drama, just quiet, final, like signing paperwork. I walked out without crying, not because it didn't hurt, but because something inside me went completely still. There's a difference between being rejected and realizing you were never truly wanted. And in that moment, I understood which one it was. I had $312 in my checking account, a part-time job that paid $9.75 an hour, and no one to call, no backup plan, no safety net. Just silence, cold air, and a house behind me that no longer belonged to me. That night, I made one decision. I would never need them again. Not for money, not for approval, not for anything. And for 8 years. I kept that promise. What they didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that the girl they erased didn't disappear. She rebuilt everything, piece by piece, quietly, carefully, until there was nothing left of the version they threw away. So when my phone lit up with my father's name after midnight, voice shaking, asking for help, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt something colder, because I already knew whatever was happening to them. I was the only one who could fix it, and what I chose to do next was something they never saw coming. I didn't expect them to call me that night. Actually, I didn't expect them to call me ever again. The last time I saw my parents, I was still a teenager, leaving everything behind without a single look back from them. No farewell, no regrets, just a sharp "you're on your own now." My father, the man who never missed a chance to remind me of my failures, had given me a one-way ticket out of their world. And now, 8 years later, here I was, sitting in my dimly lit apartment with nothing but the soft hum of the fridge for company. My phone vibrated violently, and my stomach dropped when I saw his name flash on the screen. Dad. The last person I ever expected to hear from. My first thought was to ignore it, to keep building my life, my way, without them. But something inside me shifted as I stared at his name. Maybe it was because deep down, I always hoped that one day, just one day, he'd look at me the way he looked at my sister, with pride. I picked up the phone, hesitated, and answered. "Emily, we need you." My dad's voice was shaky, something I hadn't heard in years. I let the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke, just to let the weight of his words sink in. "What happened?" I said. His words tumbled out in a rush, the panic evident, and for the first time, I heard him admit something I never thought I'd hear. He needed me, my parents, the ones who'd thrown me out. They were desperate. Their company, the one I'd never been good enough to be a part of, was collapsing, fast, and they had no one else to turn to. "Please, Emily, we can't fix this without you," he said. There it was, the plea. The one thing I never thought I'd hear. "Why me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but inside, everything was spinning. "You're the only one who can save it," he whispered, like he was confessing something so raw, so painful, that it tore at him to even admit it. And in that moment, I remembered everything. Every insult, every time I was left behind, ignored, everything that led me to this moment. I should have said no. I should have hung up. I had every right to walk away and never look back. But they were my family, despite everything. And as much as I hated admitting it, I had the power to fix this. I couldn't just leave them to fail, not when I could do something about it. So I took a deep breath, ran my fingers over the edge of the table, and made a decision that would change everything. I agreed to help them, but only on my terms. If they wanted my help, they had to come to me on my terms, not theirs. The way I'd been treated, it wasn't just going to be swept under the rug. There would be no easy fix for them this time. No more hiding behind their wealth and reputation. This time, they were going to see who I really was and what I could do. So, I set the plan into motion. But it wasn't just about saving their business. It was about showing them, once and for all, that I wasn't the failure they'd once cast me as. This was my chance to reclaim everything they had taken from me. I met them at a coffee shop 2 days later, not in their fancy boardroom, not in the place where they could hide behind their wealth or their titles. It was just a small, local cafe, the kind I used to visit when I was in college, struggling to make ends meet. But now, it felt like the most fitting place to have this conversation. My parents sat across from me, dressed in their usual expensive clothes, trying to maintain that air of control they had always carried. My father was the first to speak, his voice still shaky, despite the polished appearance. "Emily, we don't know who else to turn to," he said, eyes darting around the room like he couldn't believe he was asking for help. "I never thought we'd be here, asking you for this." He paused, waiting for me to speak, as if I was still that scared little girl who depended on their approval. But I wasn't. I wasn't that girl anymore. I could feel the weight of the years, the anger, the hurt, everything that had built up between us, sitting like a heavy stone in my chest. I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. "Why me?" I asked quietly, my eyes locked on his, not with hate, but with something much colder, something that carried the power of all the years I had spent alone, proving my worth without them. "You cut me off without a second thought. And now you expect me to fix this." My voice wasn't raised, but it carried the weight of everything I'd been holding in. "Why should I help you?" My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but she didn't speak. She never spoke when my dad was the one doing the talking. "We made a mistake," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. We were wrong about you, Emily. We treated you like you didn't matter. We made you feel like you weren't enough." For the first time in 8 years, he said something I wasn't expecting. It wasn't just an apology. It was an admission of guilt. "And we're sorry for everything." The words hung in the air, thick with the silence that followed. It felt almost surreal, hearing them say those words. I had spent so many years imagining this moment, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure how to react. Did I want to forgive them? Did I even care anymore? But there was something else in their eyes, something deeper than just regret. There was fear. Fear of losing everything they had worked for, and they knew that without me, their empire, everything they had built, was crumbling fast. The reality of the situation hit me harder than I expected. They were afraid, and I was the only one who could save them. "I can help you," I said slowly, carefully, as the pieces began to fall into place. "But it's not going to be easy. And it's not going to be cheap." I could see the tension leave their faces for a moment, like they had been holding their breath, waiting for my answer. But I wasn't done yet. "You're going to do things my way," I added, my voice firm now, knowing this was the moment I had to take control. "No more secrets. No more lies. If I'm going to fix this, you're going to have to face everything. All of it." My dad nodded, his face pale, but he didn't protest. They knew I had them right where I wanted them, and that feeling of having the power to finally control my own fate, was exhilarating. But it wasn't about the money or the business. It wasn't about proving them wrong, well, maybe just a little. It was about showing them that I was strong enough to stand on my own, and that I didn't need them to define who I was. They needed me now, and I was going to make sure they understood that. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and plans. I dove into the mess they had created, taking charge of everything, using the skills I had honed over the years, the ones they never thought I could master. But it wasn't just the business that was falling apart. It was their whole world, their legacy. The one they had tried to build by tearing me down. I could see it all now. Their empire was nothing without the people they had cast aside. Without me. And as the days passed, as I worked tirelessly to pick up the pieces of their mess, I realized something. I didn't just have the power to save them. I had the power to rebuild everything. The way I wanted it. On my terms. I spent the next few weeks buried in spreadsheets, emails, and meetings that felt like they would never end. At first, it was overwhelming, like drowning in a sea of numbers, deadlines, and broken promises. But with each passing day, I started to get a clearer picture of how deep their mess ran. It wasn't just bad investments or failed projects. It was a complete lack of structure, of vision, of responsibility. My father's empire, which he had built from the ground up, was crumbling, and I could see now that it had always been built on the wrong foundation. There was no heart in it, no real purpose, just appearances, just wealth. And it was fragile. So fragile. I had known this all along, but now it was undeniable. I could almost hear the whispers of my younger self, the one who was always told she wasn't good enough, the one who was always overlooked and treated as the family failure. But now, I had the power to change everything. It wasn't just about fixing their business anymore. It was about rewriting the entire narrative. About showing them, once and for all, that I wasn't the person they had abandoned all those years ago. I wasn't their failure. I was the one who could rebuild what they had broken. I remember the first time I truly felt it, the moment when I stepped into the boardroom for the first time, taking my place at the head of the table. It wasn't about arrogance, it was about ownership. I had earned the right to sit there. I had earned the right to speak up. And when I did, my parents, they didn't say a word. They just watched. My dad's face was a mixture of disbelief and pride I hadn't seen from him in years. My mom, on the other hand, sat with her hands folded, trying to hide the unease in her eyes, as if she wasn't sure whether to applaud me or apologize for everything. I didn't need their approval anymore. Not the way I once did. I had already proved to myself that I was capable of something far greater than they ever imagined. But still, a part of me wondered if they saw it. If they saw what I had become. I had spent so many years trying to meet their expectations, trying to win their approval, but the truth was, I didn't need them anymore. I had built my own success, one that didn't depend on their approval or their wealth. One that was mine, all mine. As the days passed and the business began to recover slowly, but surely, I kept my focus. It wasn't just about making money. It was about proving to them that I had always been more than just the person they cast aside. It was about showing them that I was worth something, that I always had been. And when things began to stabilize, when we started seeing the first signs of success again, my dad pulled me aside. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Emily, I want to apologize," he said. "For everything. For the way we treated you. For how we made you feel, like you weren't enough." I wasn't sure how to react. I had heard those words before, but never like this. Never with the weight of everything that had happened between us. "It's all right," I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. "I'm just doing what I had to do." He nodded, and for a moment, I could see the regret in his eyes. But it wasn't just regret for what he had done to me. It was regret for what he had built, a business that had no heart, no soul, nothing real to stand on. And maybe, just maybe, he saw that now. For the first time, it felt like he was finally looking at me the way I had always wanted him to, not as a failure, not as a burden, but as someone who could stand on her own, someone who could lead. My mom, too, seemed to be softening. She didn't apologize, but there was a quiet acceptance in her eyes, an acknowledgement of who I had become. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. But this was just the beginning. Fixing their company wasn't going to fix everything. The scars of the past, the years of neglect, those weren't things that could be fixed in a boardroom. They had to be healed in a different way. Slowly, I started building a new relationship with them. Not because I wanted their approval, but because I realized that, despite everything, they were still my family. And maybe, just maybe, we could start over. But it wasn't going to be easy. There would be no going back to the way things were. We had to build something new, something stronger, something that wasn't just based on appearances, but on something real. And for the first time in my life, I was in control. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about creating something new, a new legacy. One that I could be proud of. And as I looked at my parents, I knew one thing for sure. They needed me more than I needed them. And I wasn't about to let them forget it. I had been working with my parents for 3 months, and every day felt like a battle. The company was slowly recovering, but there were still days when the pressure almost crushed me, days when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, whether I was helping them because I wanted to or because I needed to prove something to myself. The weight of the past hung over every decision I made, every move I made in that cold, glass-walled office. There were days when I felt like I was finally building something I could be proud of. But then there were moments when the doubt crept back in, reminding me of how far I'd come from the girl they had thrown away, and how much I still wanted to prove them wrong. I remember one afternoon, sitting at my desk, going through the final reports for a new project we were launching. The numbers looked good, really good. I'd worked so hard on this, and it was finally coming together. But just as I was about to send the email to finalize everything, the door to my office opened. I didn't need to look up. I knew it was him. My dad. He didn't even knock anymore. He just stepped inside, a man who had once been the epitome of confidence, now a shell of that man. His face was tight, his hands fidgeting with a pen in his pocket. "Emily," he started, his voice low, uncertain. "I need to talk to you." I didn't say anything at first. I just let him speak. "I know you're doing a lot for the company. And for us," he continued, his words carefully measured, like he was still trying to hold on to some semblance of authority. "But I want you to know something. What you're doing, it's important. More than you think." I looked at him then, really looked at him. I could see the years of regret in his eyes, the weight of the decisions he had made and how they had broken him. "I've been thinking about it," he said, pacing a little now, his voice growing more agitated. We treated you badly. And I don't know how to fix it." The words hung in the air for a long time. I wasn't sure what to say. I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear it. I had spent so many years believing that nothing would ever change, that nothing would ever be enough to make up for how they had treated me. But standing there, seeing him finally acknowledge the pain he had caused, it was almost too much. I could feel the anger rise in me again, the anger I had buried for so long. "You can't just fix this," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't just get to say you're sorry and make it all better." He stopped in his tracks, looking at me like I had slapped him. I know, he whispered. "But I need you to understand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to make it right. To do better, by you, by this company." I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city skyline. The wind was picking up, and I could see the trees moving in the distance. It was strange how the world kept moving no matter what happened in our lives. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, the words coming out slower than I meant. "But I can't walk away from this either. Not now." It felt like a decision had been made, one I hadn't expected. It wasn't about letting them back in or accepting their apology. It was about the fact that I was doing this for me now. For the woman I had become. Not for them. "I'll help you," I said, turning back to him. "But it's going to take time. A lot of time. You have to prove you mean it. And it's not just about business. It's about showing me that you actually see me. Not as the failure you once thought I was, but as the person I am now." He nodded, his eyes softening. For the first time, I saw something real in him. Something that wasn't tied to his image or his pride. It was just a man, trying to make amends with the daughter he had almost lost. "I will, Emily," he said quietly. "I swear I will." And for the first time in a long while, I believed him. But I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about showing them, showing myself, that I was more than they ever thought I could be. And that whatever came next, it would be on my terms. I had spent so many years trying to prove my worth, trying to get their approval. Now, I was finally in control. And I wasn't going to let anyone forget that. As the days passed, things slowly began to shift. The company was stabilizing, but the real work, the emotional work, had just begun. My dad started showing up at the office more often, attending meetings with me, taking notes like he was trying to earn my respect. It wasn't enough yet. But it was a start. And every day, we got a little closer to something that resembled the family I had once dreamed of. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. I knew it would take more than just helping them get back on their feet. It would take time, years maybe, for all the pieces to fit into place. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. I didn't need things to be perfect anymore. I didn't need their approval. What mattered now was that I had a life I had built, on my own. And that was something they couldn't take from me. Ever again. I sat in my office, the hum of the computer and the clink of the coffee cup the only sounds breaking the silence. The city outside was alive, but here, in this small corner of the world, everything felt still, waiting. It had been 6 months since I made the decision to help my parents. 6 months of long hours, constant meetings, and a never-ending whirlwind of work. The company was stabilizing, yes, but it wasn't easy. Every move I made was scrutinized. Every decision I made was questioned. My father still wasn't fully on board with the changes I was pushing for, and my mother, well, she had always been more concerned with appearances than with substance. But despite all of that, something was shifting. I could feel it. I wasn't just fixing their business anymore. I was changing the way they saw me, the way they had always seen me. It was no longer about proving them wrong, it was about showing them who I really was. But as much as I had grown, as much as I had learned, there was still that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. What if it wasn't enough? What if, after all this, they still saw me as that girl they had cast aside all those years ago? That thought lingered, especially when my father called one evening and asked me to meet him for dinner. I hadn't seen him outside of work in weeks, and frankly, I wasn't sure I was ready to deal with him. But I agreed, knowing that it was inevitable. So, I met him at a quiet restaurant downtown, one that had been a staple of our family's social life for years. He was already seated when I arrived, his back straight, his hands folded in front of him, as if he was preparing for a business meeting instead of a personal conversation. When he saw me, his eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but guarded. "I wanted to talk to you about something." I sat across from him, studying his face. There was something different about him, something that I couldn't quite place. For the first time in a long time, he looked vulnerable. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral, not giving away how much his presence still affected me. He hesitated, looking at his hands before meeting my eyes again. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about everything. About how I treated you. About what I did to you, and to this family." I could feel my heart rate quicken. I wasn't expecting this. Not now, not here. "I was wrong," he said, his voice quieter this time. "I see that now. I see how much you've done for us. For the company. For me." His words hung in the air, and I could tell he was struggling to find the right ones. "I didn't realize until recently how much I pushed you away. How much I hurt you by not believing in you, by not giving you the chance you deserved." The words were painful to hear. After everything, after all the years of feeling like I wasn't enough, hearing him finally acknowledge that, it was both validating and crushing. "It's been hard for me," he continued, looking away for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I've always been the one in control, the one making the decisions, but I realize now that I was wrong to assume I knew what was best for you. You've proven yourself to me, Emily, in ways I never imagined." I wanted to say something, wanted to say that I forgave him, or that I was over it, but the truth was, I wasn't. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Not when the wounds were still so fresh, not when I had worked so hard to prove myself to someone who had never believed in me. Instead, I just nodded, trying to mask the emotions that were swirling inside me. "I need you to know," he said, his voice low, "that I'm proud of you. I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you. You've turned everything around. And I'm sorry for not seeing that sooner." I wasn't sure how to respond. The words I had longed to hear for years were finally being spoken, but it felt different now. It wasn't the same. It wasn't enough. "I know," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter as they left my mouth. "But words are just words, Dad." His face tightened at my response, but he didn't argue. He just sat there, looking at me with a kind of sadness I had never seen before. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said after a long pause, "but I want to make it right. If you'll let me, I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I can be the father you need." It was a difficult thing to hear, because it was too late. The years of neglect, the years of silence, couldn't be undone with a few words over dinner. But as much as it hurt to admit it, I realized something. I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need him to tell me he was proud of me. I had built this life on my own. I had built it with my own hands, my own blood, my own tears. And that was enough. I appreciate that, I said finally, standing up and looking him in the eye. But I've already moved on. I'm doing this for me, not for you. And for the first time in my life, I walked away from him, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was finally free. Free to live my life on my terms, without the weight of their expectations holding me down. As I stepped out of the restaurant and into the cool night air, I realized something else too. I didn't need their approval to be successful, to be enough. I had always been enough. And that was all that mattered. I didn't realize how much I had changed until that one phone call. It was a few weeks after my conversation with my dad, and I thought everything was finally falling into place. The company was on track, and my life felt like it was moving in a direction I had chosen. But then the call came, my mother. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it before, a tremor running through every word. "Emily, can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I had been avoiding her, not because I hated her, but because the pain was still too fresh. I hadn't forgiven her for all the years she had ignored me, for the way she let my father treat me like I didn't matter. But I knew I couldn't run away from this forever. "Sure," I said, not really knowing what to expect. We agreed to meet at her house, the same house where I had spent years feeling like I didn't belong. It hadn't changed much. The furniture was the same, the pictures on the walls still framed moments of a life I didn't recognize anymore. I walked in, and there she was, sitting in the living room. Her hair was graying now, and there were wrinkles around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked older, more fragile. The woman who had once been the center of our family, the one who always had everything under control, seemed like a shadow of herself. "Emily," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been thinking a lot, about everything. About you. And about us." I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. She had always been the one to side with my father, the one who never stood up for me. But as I looked at her, I saw something different. Something that looked like regret, something I hadn't seen in her before. "I know I've hurt you," she continued, her eyes welling with tears. "I know I've failed you as a mother." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You didn't just fail me," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You pushed me away. You let him treat me like I didn't matter." She lowered her head, unable to meet my eyes. For a moment, the silence between us was deafening. I could feel the years of pain, of abandonment, washing over me again. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. I was afraid. I didn't know how to help you, and I didn't know how to deal with everything. I thought if I just kept quiet, everything would be okay. I wanted to yell at her, to tell her how much her silence had hurt me, how much her inability to stand up for me had broken me. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, listening. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything." Her apology, however heartfelt, didn't feel like enough. I wasn't sure it ever would be. I had spent so many years waiting for her to see me, to see the person I had become. But that person no longer needed her validation. I had built my own life. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued, "but I want to make things right. I want to be a better mother to you. If you'll let me." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, I thought about all the years I had spent hoping for this very moment. The truth was, I wasn't sure I could forgive her, not yet, at least. But what I did know was that I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said slowly, my voice quiet but firm. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to try and rebuild this, if you are." She looked at me,